This bearded dragon substrate is collected from the wild, exactly where bearded dragons live. Let's review it. In the wild, bearded dragons dig deep burrows into the sand. It's dry and compact, yet moist deeper down. The perfect recipe for making burrows. But how will this fare in our enclosures? I devised a test. I poured this sand into 2 containers. One remained dry and the other I wet down. Then I put both under my bearded dragon's basking spot to bake. If my theory was correct, the wet sample would form a crust on the surface while staying moist down below. The perfect formula for holding burrows. A few days later, I retrieved the samples and it went lovely and crusted and dry on top. Then I dug into the substrate, pretending I was a bearded dragon, to see if the substrate held its form and held a burrow just like it would in the wild. And it held its form beautifully and it created that perfect dynamic to hold a burrow. That's exactly what we were hoping for. Now I also wanted to evaluate the levels of dust this substrate would create. Now I did a quick test. I poured the dry sample between 2 cups in front of a black background. The pouring back and forth would kick dust into the air if this truly was a dusty substrate. And as you can see, lots of dust was sent into the air. In the wild, this doesn't really matter because in the wild there's wind, there's harsh sunlight, there's rain, the elements hold the dust at bay, and the bearded dragon isn't constantly subjugated to intense dust. Now in our vivariums, in a box in our home, that's a little bit different. We want to be mindful of making sure that our bearded dragons aren't just breathing in tons of dust. Now a really good way that I found to tackle this dust problem is once a week or so spray down your bearded dragon's enclosure, and that allows that dust to settle and become a part of the substrate once again. Now let's talk about cost. Now this is a pricey substrate. The price is usually between $30 to $50 depending on if you can get it on sale. In the UK you can find it on Amazon for around £43. Now this is expensive compared to the other substrates on the market. However, you are paying a premium for getting exactly what they live on in the wild. I have done DIY mixes using different brand substrates in the past and got kind of similar, and I've got that crust on the surface and that ability to hold a burrow, but I never had it exactly like it was in the wild. Now, cleaning this substrate is a little bit trickier than normal sand. You can't exactly sieve this substrate because it's rock hard on the surface. You can't use a normal sand sieve like you could on play sand, for example. So what you're going to want to do is spot clean, maybe get some paper towels and take off the feces, then maybe get a little hand trowel and just scrape off a little bit of the top layer on top just to make sure that we keep it clean. To really make use of this substrate, let's talk about substrate depth. Now I think to really get what you want to get out of the real substrate, you're going to want to give them some level of depth for them to create actual burrows. Now somewhere between 4 to 6 inches of depth, like minimum, is what I would say. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense to spend the money if you're going to give them like an inch of substrate. But if you want your bearded dragon to have what's naturalistic and wild and be able to dig and make a burrow at any point in the enclosure, this is the substrate for you. Overall, I think this substrate is perfect for those that are trying to go for as natural as possible. I'd recommend trying it at least once to see for yourself if you actually like it. Now you can find this substrate linked down below, and I'll see you in the next one.